Hi, this is Taryn Lupo from TarynLupo.com. I just got back from the Porcupine Freedom Festival 2015, and I found a really interesting story that I want to share with you. There's been a trend over the past few years where I noticed a growing Islamophobia. Now, I don't really know many Muslims. I'm kind of a white-bread suburban kid that didn't really have any Muslim friends growing up. So the most I ever knew about it was what TV told me. And usually they focused on the most extreme kind of Muslims, and that's all you ever heard about. Unfortunately, there's a very negative trend in the US where people can be openly racist and outright violent to Muslims and really get a slap on the wrist or even encouraged more in the media to do it. Now, there's a long history of the US of this. The government has to create a bad guy or a boogeyman. When this country was first founded, it was the Native Americans, and then the African Americans, and the Italians, the Chinese, the Irish. And most recently, it was the Mexicans that they put a big scare, for border control, and of course the Muslims. This growing negativity and fear is really not a good path. So I wanted to share a positive story I found about a group of Muslims at a Liberty Festival in the middle of New Hampshire called Muslims for Liberty. A small group of Muslims, organized by Will Coley, decided to get together and feed people for Ramadan. They actually gave away over 2,000 plates of free food to complete strangers.
My name is Will Coley. I'm from East Tennessee. I'm the National Director and founder of Muslims for Liberty. We're not the first, but we have become the largest and most successful libertarian outreach in the Muslim community and Muslim outreach within the libertarian community. Last year, we noticed that Ramadan would coincide with the last day of Porcfest. And what we decided to do was raise a little bit of money and bring the spirit of Ramadan with us to the festival. We gave away about 750 free meals, alhamdulillah, and it was received so well by both the libertarian and the Muslim community that we decided this year to come back and do it again. But this year, Ramadan was during all of Porcfest. So we offered a free meal every night, all week, at sundown to all of the festival goers. The idea was to, encourage the spreading of ideas and the fostering of a sense of family and community by sharing food with those people and bringing people together. The Prophet said that the greatest act that a Muslim can commit, the greatest act in Islam, is to give food and to greet those whom you know with peace, whether you know them or not. And that's what Ramadan at Porcfest is about.
It was estimated that 1,500 people attended the week-long Porcupine Freedom Festival this year. Even with all the noise and commotion going on around them, Davi, Will, and the other Muslims still stop and pray before eating.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Looks like it's going to find
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, they're going to get the Liberty rounds.
Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
They are.
ولم يكن
They would just toss it down
كفوا
and say, here's the $10 coin.
أحد.
And somebody that has
Allah
absolutely no clue about currency would be like, oh, okay. And then they go to the bank, and the bank says, we can't take this. This isn't possible.
سمع الله لمن حمده.
Look almost identical to
الله أكبر.
except they say, not something like that. Right back to things. I could toss that down.
الله أكبر.
Stupid people everywhere.
الله
All kinds
أكبر.
of ailments in Silver Liberty. Silver Liberty. I've been tricked. Now if you're going to sell it, I think
This is from Mark Edgeny and Freeman.
Most people are kind of like me, where we've never really met Muslims. So when I met Will Coley, it kind of threw me for a loop. He's just a good old boy hillbilly, but he's Muslim. So people don't know what to make of him.
I would have to say, of all of the projects that Muslims for Liberty has done in the last 5 years, Ramadan at Porcfest has been the most successful outreach program that we've done. We were able to raise $1,500 for the first one, and Imam Zaid Shaker endorsed the effort, and we were actually able to raise $4,200 for Muslims all over the globe for the second one. The way it's been received by the Porcfest audience is amazing. The call to prayer has become a Pavlov's bell at Porcfest now. People wait to hear the adhan. They're happy and excited to hear the call to prayer because they know that's when the Muslims will bust out the free food and the community gathering and the fellowship that happens between people while they're eating these free meals. And we were really encouraged by the response that we got this year. People were really happy, and alhamdulillah, we're really happy that they received it so well.
Did they ask a lot of questions?
Yeah, we did get a lot of questions. People come up, they ask us about, well, what do you think about ISIS? Or, well, what do you think about what's going on with the Draw Muhammad cartoon contests? Or, well, what do you think about the war? And a lot of people have the same opinions that we do. ISIS, that should go without saying. They're violent and we don't support them. And most of the people here, if not all the people here, are quite openly vocal against the military expansionist policies of the U.S. in the Middle East and in South Asia. So, we get an opportunity to answer the questions that people want to have answered, and at the same time clarify some things that people may not completely understand. How is liberty and Islam connected? Well, on a historic basis, the concept of liberty was actually borrowed from the Muslim community, not directly, but indirectly. The idea began 5,000 years ago in China and then filtered its way through Greece, and then those writings were taken into the Muslim world and discussed. Commentaries were written, and then that idea was taken post-Crusades from the books that were taken by Crusaders back to Europe, and that's what kickstarted the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. So without the historic connection to Islam, the Western concept of liberty might not have ever existed. Well, in the modern political landscape, there's been the rise of a term that you hear quite often now. It's Islamophobia, and I feel that that's a somewhat incorrect term, because a phobia is a fear. And what we see expressed by these people isn't particularly fearful. It seems more of an unfiltered or partially filtered hatred, advocacy for violence, genocide, nuclear bombing of entire civilian populations. These aren't actions of people who are afraid of another people. These are actions of people who have a visceral hatred. I think the proper term would be Islamomnesia, an irrational and central hatred of Muslims. And a lot of this, or if not most of this, is fed through donors who also give money to other very anti-liberty efforts. Sheldon Adelson would be one who's been found to be one of the largest funders of the anti-Muslim movement, as well as the anti-Sharia movement, as well as providing 85% of the funding to fight the efforts to legalize medical cannabis in Florida, along with being involved in the war lobby and encouraging the quote-unquote special relationship the United States has with Israel, where we use our military as cannon fodder, basically, for the interest of a foreign nation. And you know, these are the people who are funding and pushing this message. So these are people, they have a vested interest, financial interest in the continuation of this type of hatred and vitriol, because the further division of society and the dehumanization of the Muslim population both at home and abroad only paves the way and opens the door for the continuous military expansion of what I see has become an American military empire, dead set on robbing the resources and wealth of every nation that it comes in contact with.
Another interesting fellow from Muslims for Liberty is Davi Barker. He's an author, and when you talk to him, you would never really suspect he's Muslim. But don't let that fool you, he's devoutly Muslim.
My name is Davi Barker, and I'm the Assistant Director of Muslims for Liberty. And this year we did a Ramadan iftar meal every day here at Porcfest to celebrate Ramadan. Last year we did one day. Next year we'll probably do all. It's interesting because Ramadan is a lunar calendar, and Porcfest is on a solar calendar, and so Ramadan sort of moves 11 days every year, passing through Porcfest very slowly. So we'll have a couple of years to do Ramadan at Porcfest. It's widely popular. Everyone enjoys sharing a meal. Everyone enjoys sort of standing around and talking over a meal. It's interesting because we'll do the call to prayer, and like for us that's a call to prayer, but for them it's a call to food, and so we all end up in the same place. It's also it was surprisingly elevating for me to be fasting at Porcfest, and I didn't expect that at all, because I'm not fasting with a large Muslim community. I'm fasting with a very small Muslim community and a very large, very intelligent, very awake, sort of a peripheral community. And so rather than fasting and binging the way the Muslim community tends to do, it was a lot of control of my own diet, a lot of quiet reflection, a lot of intelligent conversation, and this ended up being probably one of my best weeks of Ramadan I've had in a few years, and that was really meaningful to me. But I think most importantly, it makes us welcome. It makes us an integral part of this community, to say that they know that we're here, that we're reliable, that we'll answer questions, even difficult questions if they have them, and that that we share a value, that we have a sort of a similitude of principles with them, and that helps them sort of include us in their society, really. So more than any other political ideology that I'm aware of, libertarians are very sensitive to history, especially to the manipulations of history. And Muslims also have a very large historical memory. They tell their story, and they drive their identity deep into the past and find meaning there. And so this year, Will Cooley made a t-shirt that said, La ikrah fid-din, which means let there be no coercion in this way of life. And to be able to say, like, this is a 1400-year-old construction of the non-aggression principle, which is to do no harm, made it very clear that, like, this history of Islam, when it abided by this rule in its scripture, was an integral and parallel part of the history of freedom and liberty, not in America, maybe partly in America, but more importantly on the planet and in humanity in general. And it's an untaught piece of history. And it's interesting that Americans don't learn it because public schools and universities tend to ignore Islamic history, and if they're going to teach Islamic history, they're going to make it sort of Orientalist and other. And then Muslims, they don't really study their history either. They look at the golden age of Islam and they say, look how great it used to be, but they don't ask, why was it so great then? What were they doing that we're not doing now? And what they're not doing now that they were doing then is fundamentally libertarianism. It was the ability of the individual and the entrepreneur to live according to his conscience, to buy and trade and really just be in the world as he saw fit, so long as he didn't do harm. And so at the same time that it's valuable to have this sort of message of Islam that we're introducing these people to familiarize themselves with it, there's also this exchange that's happening. It's a trade, right? Like, you never give anything for free, everything is a trade, where like libertarianism, the concept of non-aggression, the concept of peace with your neighbors, the concept of coexistence and tolerance, like, we're exemplifying that in a major way and passing it back to the Muslim community.
A lot of people ask the question, like, how did a guy that looks like me, just your average East Tennessee hick, become Muslim? And not only become Muslim, but become a noted speaker on Islam and Islamic jurisprudence. And it was really kind of a strange story. I studied religion most of my life. I grew up in a family that was split between Pentecostal and Baptist. And one told me that the other was going to hell, even though they both believed in the same book. And as a child, at around 8 years old, that was particularly fascinating to me. So I wanted to understand everything that there was about every religion that existed. Not only the religions, but the sects and what causes the conflicts, both between the sects and the religions. And through that, around 25, 26 years of age, I started studying Islam. And about 3 or 4 years later, some things happened that put me in a position to lead me into a mosque. When I entered that mosque, I met the first Muslim that I'd ever met in my life. This is after almost 4 years of study of the Islamic faith. I went in knowing already that I was a Muslim, that I just didn't know if I was a Muslim, how to be a Muslim, and what I was reading, if it was correct. And I went into a small mosque in Ocala, Florida, and the community did a lot to guide me and to help me find an academic path in Islam, which led me to becoming, a lecturer and a teacher today. I'm just, I'm the hillbilly Muslim, and that's something that I'm happy to claim, because just because I'm Muslim doesn't mean that I need to be a Muhammad or an Abdullah or a Malik or an Abdul Rahman. And it doesn't mean that I need to be brown. It doesn't mean that I need to dress or speak or look like an Arab or an Asian or adopt their culture. I'm a Muslim, but I'm still an East Tennessean. I'm an Appalachian. I have my own culture. And we've found a way to take my culture and my faith and blend them into one body. And that's kind of how I got to be who I am today. I fell, so to speak, into the cultural vacuum that most Muslim converts are sucked into when they become Muslim, where I changed my dress, I wore a turban, I dressed in Arab clothing, and then a few years into my walk in Islam, I moved back to where I came from, back to my hometown. And very shortly after, I got back in touch with me and my culture and who I was. And after doing so, I find that I'm a better Muslim now and a better person, because I am being me as the real me instead of an Arab, pseudo-Iranian, Asian knockoff of the man that I actually am.
Please give to Muslims for liberty.
If you support the work that Muslims for Liberty does, then first of all, thank you very much. Barakallah fikum, jazakumullah khair for the support that you give us. But the fight's not over. The hatred still exists. There are still events, there are still venues that need to be broken into. There's still new ground to break in our efforts to spread a better understanding of Islam in the U.S. and a better understanding of libertarianism among Muslims. If you want to learn more about the work that we do, you can go to muslims4liberty.org. You're also welcome to join or look at our Facebook page, Facebook.com/Muslims4Liberty. We also have a GoFundMe site that we use to fund all of our events. This year we've done the Porcupine Freedom Festival. We'll also be doing the Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest. And I'll be speaking at the Republican Liberty Caucus National Convention as well this year, inshallah. And if you want to help support that, then please send us a donation. Every penny helps. We were able to raise $4,200 to feed all these free meals through 10, 15, 20, and $50 donations from Muslims all over the world. And every $10 or $15 that a person or a fellow Muslim decides that they want to send to us is a dollar that will be spent by an entirely volunteer network of people to help spread, like I said, a better understanding of Islam as well as a better understanding among Muslims of the liberty movement.
Hopefully this story helps open your mind and helps you realize that you just can't believe everything you hear in the news. It sure did help me. For more information and links to Muslim for Liberty, you can check the description below or go to my website at www